This happened to me in 1988. Renata and I had been friends since our 20s, back when we both worked the switchboard at an insurance office downtown. She was the kind of friend who called you out when you needed it and showed up with a casserole when you needed that instead. That spring, her marriage had ended, quietly and without much drama, the way some marriages do when two people simply stop reaching for each other. She needed to get out of the house and out of her own head, and I needed a break from mine too, so we planned a 5-day hike along the Ridge Trail, the kind with a paper map you fold wrong every single time and a printed guidebook with a cracked spine. We packed the way everyone packed then: canned food, a 2-burner camp stove, a film camera loaded with 36 exposures, spare batteries in a plastic bag so they would not corrode, and a portable multi-band radio about the size of a paperback book. Renata's brother had given it to her years earlier. It could pick up regular music stations, the weather band, and a few two-way radio channels. It had a long antenna you had to angle just right, and on clear nights, we'd like to lie in our sleeping bags and find distant stations playing music, guessing how far away the signals had traveled. The first 2 days were easy and good. We climbed steadily, ate too much trail mix, and argued once about whether we had taken a wrong turn at a fork the guidebook barely mentioned. Renata thought we should backtrack. I thought the trail markers looked freshly painted and trusted them. I was right that time, and she reminded me of it for the rest of the trip, which was fair. That first night, we camped in a wide meadow below a granite outcrop. Renata taught me a card game her grandmother used to play, dealing hands onto a flat rock by lantern light while our socks dried on a line between 2 trees. She talked about her marriage a little, not in a bitter way, more like someone describing a house she used to live in and had already started to forget the layout of. I told her about a man I had been seeing who kept canceling plans. Renata told me plainly that I could do better. It was exactly what I needed to hear and had been too stubborn to tell myself. We laughed more than either of us expected to. It was the kind of night that reminded me why we had been friends for so long. The second day was harder walking, mostly uphill through switchbacks. By afternoon, my knees were complaining and Renata's heel had started to blister despite the moleskin she had packed. We stopped early to let her foot rest, boiled coffee on the little stove, and watched a pair of hawks circle the valley below us. Renata took photographs with her film camera, carefully because she only had 1 roll left and wanted to save some frames for the rest of the trip. Neither of us had any reason yet to think about who else might be out there with us. The woods felt entirely ours. On the 3rd evening, we made camp in a low clearing near a creek, the kind of spot with flat ground and a view of the far ridgeline turning orange as the sun went down. We got the stove going, ate beans and rice from tin plates, and Renata turned on the radio to see if we could catch a ball game. Instead of a broadcast, we heard 2 men talking. Not a station, just voices breaking through static and crossing over each other like two-way radio chatter. We almost turned it off. Then one of the voices said something that made Renata's hand freeze on the dial. They're set up right where the creek bends. Blue tent, 2 of them, no dog. I remember the silence afterward more than I remember the voice itself. Renata looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Our tent was blue. There were 2 of us. We were camped exactly where the creek bent, and we did not have a dog. The voice continued through the static. We caught something about a truck parked near a fire road and someone named Wade who was supposed to meet up before dark. None of that meant anything to us. What mattered was the way he had described our campsite. It sounded as though someone had either seen us or was looking at us right then. Renata turned the volume down. She whispered, "Maybe they're talking about another campsite." I wanted to believe that. I told her, "There are probably other blue tents out here." Renata nodded, but neither of us sounded convinced. My father had been a trucker and he used to talk about radio signals sometimes carrying much farther than expected. He called it skip. I barely understood how it worked, but that night it gave me an explanation I desperately wanted to believe. Maybe we were hearing people miles away. Maybe somewhere else on the mountain, there were two campers beside another creek bend with another blue tent. We told ourselves that. We did not entirely believe it. We packed the radio away, kept the camp quiet, and decided to take turns staying awake. Nothing happened. No footsteps, no lights, nothing but owls and the creek moving over the stones. By morning, we felt almost foolish. Almost. While Renata boiled water for coffee, I walked down to fill our canteens. That was when I found the boot print. It was pressed into the soft mud at the edge of the creek, close enough to our campsite that whoever made it could have stood only a few yards from our tent. It was not mine. It was not Renata's. Renata's hiking boots had a diamond tread. Mine had a wavy line down the center from years of wear. This print had a flat, plain sole, more like a heavy work boot, and it pointed toward our camp. I crouched beside it for a long time. Someone had been close. Close enough to see the tent. Close enough to count how many people were there. And they had moved quietly enough that neither of us had heard them. I did not tell Renata yet. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted another hour where the trip still felt normal. We ate a quiet breakfast and packed faster than we had the mornings before. Renata noticed I was distracted. She asked, "You okay?" I told her, "Just tired." She looked at me for another second but let it go. We started hiking. The trail climbed through thinning trees toward an old fire lookout tower marked on our map as abandoned. Around midday, Renata suddenly stopped. She crouched beside a tree at the edge of the path. Someone tied this. A narrow strip of red cloth had been knotted around a low branch. It was not one of the official trail markers from our guidebook. Those were painted blazes. This was different. The cloth looked recent, and it had been tied exactly where the trail divided. One path continued toward the old lookout tower. The other followed the ridge. I told Renata, could have been somebody marking a route. She nodded, could be. Neither of us moved toward the tower. We took the ridge path. After we had walked another few minutes, I finally told her about the boot print. Renata stopped. "You found it near the tent?" I nodded. "Right near the creek. And it wasn't ours?" "No." She looked back the way we had come. Then she took out the map. Renata sat on a flat rock and studied it. Her hands were not completely steady, but her voice was, "If somebody is watching us, we stop being predictable." I sat beside her. Renata continued, "We don't camp at the obvious spots, and we don't take the route they expect us to take." That sounded good to me. Before changing course, we followed the ridge for another short stretch, looking for a safe place to leave the marked trail. That was when I noticed something above us. At first I thought it was fallen branches piled against the slope. Then I saw the straight edge of a board. I stopped and touched Renata's arm. She followed my eyes. Hidden among a stand of trees was a small wooden blind. Someone had covered parts of it with branches and brush so it blended into the hillside. It sat slightly above the trail. We climbed toward it carefully. The closer we got, the worse I felt. The opening in the front was not aimed toward the ridge trail. It was aimed downhill, toward the creek, toward the bend where we had camped the night before. Renata whispered, "That's our campsite." I knew she was right. From inside that blind, someone would have had a clear view of the blue tent, the creek, the stove, both of us. Inside, resting on a rough board, was a pair of field glasses. Beside them was a small spiral notebook, swollen slightly from damp air. Neither of us touched it. For several seconds we simply stared. The boot print had told me someone had been near us. The blind told me something worse. Someone had chosen a place to watch from. Renata backed away first. She whispered, "We're leaving." I did not argue. We returned to the ridge path long enough to reach a safe place to cut away from it. Then we changed our route completely. We moved through a stretch of forest the guidebook barely mentioned. No official campsites, no fire rings, no obvious place where someone looking at a map would expect two hikers to stop. The walking became harder. It was slower. But for the first time all day, I felt like we were doing something instead of simply waiting to see what happened next. We made a cold camp that night. No fire, no stove, nothing that would make light or carry a cooking smell through the trees. We ate crackers and canned peaches in the dark. A low rock overhang broke the wind and helped hide us from the open ridge above. Renata kept the radio against her chest with the volume turned almost all the way down. We took turns watching the tree line. Neither of us said how frightened we were. Around midnight, the radio suddenly came alive. Static, then a man's voice. Only 4 words came through clearly. Lost them. Check the tower. Renata looked at me. I felt every hair on my arms rise. Neither of us slept again. I lay there thinking through those 4 words. Lost them. If the men on the radio were talking about us, changing our route had worked, but that meant something else too. They had expected us to go somewhere, and the red cloth had been tied at the fork leading toward the tower. I remembered standing there with Renata only hours earlier. One path toward the ridge, one path toward that abandoned lookout, a fresh strip of red cloth marking the split. Now the radio was saying, check the tower. At first light, we went in the opposite direction. We did not return to the marked trail. We followed a smaller creek downhill because we knew water would eventually lead toward lower ground and hopefully a road. It was slow going. Loose rocks, fallen branches, thick brush. We were tired enough that every few minutes, one of us stumbled. Neither of us complained. By mid-morning, we heard an engine somewhere below us. At first, we stopped because we were afraid it might be the truck we had heard mentioned on the radio. Then the engine passed and faded away. A real road had to be close. We kept moving. By early afternoon, we reached a narrow service road. A faded sign pointed toward a ranger outpost several miles away. I do not remember ever being happier to see a sign. We followed the road. By evening, we reached a small ranger outpost with one uniformed man, a wood stove, and a payphone mounted outside. The ranger took one look at us and asked if we were all right. Renata answered, "We need to tell you about something." We told him everything. The radio message describing our campsite, the boot print, the red cloth at the trail fork, the hidden blind overlooking the creek, the field glasses, the notebook, and the second message, lost them, check the tower. The ranger wrote everything down. He radioed the information in and told us someone would check the area in daylight. Then he let us use the payphone. Renata called her brother. When she explained what had happened, he told us to stay exactly where we were. He drove 3 hours to get us. We never learned who the voices belonged to. We never learned who had made the boot print. And we never learned who had been using the blind above our campsite. A ranger went back to the area the following day. He found the blind exactly where we had described it, but the field glasses were gone. The notebook was gone. Anything that had been left inside had been cleared out. All that remained was the wooden structure, flattened grass, and marks where things had rested. Someone had returned before the rangers arrived.